Okay, so I'm going to start here with this chapter. This is pretty wild. It's very intense. So I'm trying to take this seriously. I'm trying to see what it means, and I'm curious about this ayah. Ayah 278, of course, Surah 2, the cow. O believers, fear God and give up outstanding interest if you are true believers. If you do not, then beware of a war with God and his messenger. But if you repent, you may retain your principle, neither inflicting nor suffering harm. That's 278. 280, that's 278, 279. 280, if it is difficult for someone to repay a debt, postpone it until a time of ease. And if you waive it, it's an act of charity. It will be better for you, if only you knew. So let's focus on 278 for now, interest. Now, I know that there's something called compound interest. I don't know, like some of you guys are in different countries. I know like some people are in the Middle East, but I'm in North America. In North America, they have compound interest. So the way that compound interest works, it's like, imagine you owe $100, interest is 10%, just for easy math. Then it becomes $110, and then you're paying 10% off that 110. So if you have that interest based monthly, it ends up being a wild calculator. Now, most interest is done annually. So it's not as bad as monthly interest, but interest kills you. And the reason why interest kills you is because you owe money on money. Now, who are the people who have to pay a whole bunch in interest? It's the poor. It's poor people. Now, the reason why, I mean, from a financial perspective, the reason why they have to pay more interest is because they failed their debt. So, for example, a credit card company will give somebody $1,000. They don't pay that debt. They're a higher risk, a higher liability, and then you have to charge them interest because they're a higher risk, a higher liability. So, for you to loan them money, you would charge interest. This is the argument that people who use interest, who sell interest, will use. And I understand that argument. I'm definitely not. I'm not against that argument. The thing that I have a problem with is taking advantage of people who don't understand the financial system. So I know this. In North America, I mean, for the people who grew up in North America, how much did you learn about interest? Like when I was a student, I took a student loan out. It's called OSAP. I took a student loan out, didn't understand money. They gave me like $10,000 or I don't know, remember how much, $5,000 or whatever the amount was. I didn't understand money. So I'm paying my tuition, I'm paying my school bills, I'm paying all this stuff. After I pay this all off, I have to get a job. Why? To pay off the debt. But that debt has interest. That debt is connected to interest. Interest is low. I think interest was like at 2-3% because they're not trying to kill you with interest. But the fact is that after you're done school, you need to pay interest to pay that back. Did they tell you about how compound interest works? Did they tell you about how interest works at all? Not really. You have no idea how money works. Essentially, the way the interest system works in Canada is a trap. They trap students by getting them to invest in their education. They overcharge the education. And I can, if anybody wants to get a basic understanding of economics, what they'll do is they basically, it's government subsidized, so they can charge whatever they want. So the government goes, hey, take this $30,000 loan. You're 18, you have no idea how interest works. Then afterwards, you owe $10,000, $30,000, whatever the hell the amount is. You owe a crap load of money out over a series of 4 years or longer. Now you're in debt to the bank. You know what that's called? That's called slavery, because all the money that you make, you don't even own that money. If you own $30,000 to the bank and then your first job, you're making $40,000 a year, the government taxes like, I don't know, 30% of that. So you make $40,000 a year before tax, after tax, that's like $25,000. After you have to pay the banks, but then you want to get a car, then you want to get this, and there's interest and all that, and you don't know how interest works. So guess what? You get screwed. So I'll tell you guys a story. My first job, I worked at a used car dealership, and actually I didn't really sell cars. I sold interest. I sold for the banks. I made money for the banks. So that's why I have a really strong understanding of how interest works and how financial institutions work. Now, what we would do. And I mean, I didn't know how interest works. I didn't know how I was screwing people, so please don't shoot me in the head. But what you would do is it was subprime loans. Now, what subprime loans are is you can get them a car. They need a car. I mean, they're shackled. They need a car for work or whatever. But because they're not a prime candidate, their interest rate is, the credit score is under 700. What ends up happening is they're so-called subprime. Now, subprime people are essentially told that, hey, you can't make your debt. So they charge them heavy interest, 15% compounded interest. I've seen it all the way up to 20% compounded interest. Just a point of reference, what a 20% compound interest is, let's just say the car is worth $5,000. The interest loan is like another $5,000. So it's not 20% of the deal, it's 20% of the principal. So when the Quran is talking about principle, I'll explain to you what principle means. Here, let me pause it, I'll find it. Now it says here, but if you repent, you may retain your principle, neither inflicting suffering or harm. I'm curious that it means principles as like a moral perspective, like you can control your principles, or does it mean principle from a perspective of like the actual cost? So what that means is, what the principal payment is, again, let's just say that the item you're buying is a car, that car is $5,000, that principal is $5,000. So if you repent, you can at least keep the money that you gave them. If I give you $5,000, the car is just the value of $5,000. But if I gave you $5,000, I think it's what it's saying. Tell me if I'm wrong, because it could be principles from a moral perspective, but I don't think so. What it's saying is keep your principal, keep your initial payment, just don't charge interest. Interest is a fascinating concept because my question is, why should the banks take a higher risk for somebody that doesn't know how to pay their loans out? In other words, is it incumbent on the society to teach people how to understand money? I got trapped in interest. Like, for example, credit card. And while I'm selling interest, by the way, while I'm selling products and what we're making money off of interest, I'm not making money off the interest. By the way, the banks are making money off the interest. I'm getting my stipend because I'm in deals, or I'm getting my stipend, my piece of the puzzle. But is it incumbent on the government, on your society, to teach you how money works so you don't get screwed over? Like, I was getting charged 20% interest on my credit cards because I didn't understand how money worked. So I had my OSAP loans and then I had my credit cards. Why are you giving 18-year-old idiots like me a credit card? They don't know what they're doing. It's free money. You get a free $1,000. You're putting it down. You're going out. You're screwing yourself. You're screwing yourself. They're screwing you, and you don't even know it. Oh my God, I'm getting too excited. But I mean, then the pushback of that would be, well, why should the banks even be able to loan you money? And then how do they make money if they're loaning you money? See, what this verse kind of looks like to me, and obviously just me figuring it out, what it looks like to me is a conversation between two people. So if I loaned you $5,000, don't charge interest on that money. That makes sense. I would agree with that. I'm curious to what the view is from an Islamic perspective on interest coming from the banks. Is it the same thing? What's even more interesting is, like, okay, I was thinking about this thing about interest for a long time and how interest screws people. Canada and the United States are in so much debt to the banks that we're having trouble paying off the actual interest, not even having trouble paying off the principal. We can't even pay the interest at this point. So all the tax money that you're paying, so you're paying, you make a salary, right? I hope this is not confusing, but if it is, I can make another video of it. You have a salary. Let's just say that salary is $100,000. The government taxes you 40% off that $100,000. That's $60,000. Now you have that $60,000. Then you have to pay tax on this, pay tax on this, pay tax on this, pay tax on this. You only have, like, to pay tax and items, you only have like no money left. And then on top of that, the money that you have to pay interest on it. And if you're struggling, you pay more interest. You pay more interest if you're struggling. And then you would say, well, should the banks have to bail you out? Well, maybe the whole system has screwed you. This is like kind of like what I'm realizing with our institutions. Like, are they just taking advantage of people who don't know what they're doing? Because now, like, I made sure to pay off my credit cards, but I'll tell you something, it was hard. And I was a slave while I was paying off my credit cards. You're a slave. You're a slave to the banks. You're a slave to your liabilities. You're a slave to it. Because if you buy these liabilities to feel better and then you have to pay interest and taxes and all this stuff on it, you're being screwed. So essentially what it's telling you is to not screw people over with money. I'm curious to what your perspective on this is. It was a total rant, but I'm so curious to what the Muslim perspective on this is. Cool, guys. Thanks for watching.